Of course, obtaining the codebook was not enough. To destroy this Iron Dragon, this Canavar, as the Ottomans had named it, we had to send it 3 encrypted messages telling it to stand down. There were Ottoman outposts scattered along the railroad tracks. The commanders there carried high-priority message capsules. We had to use those to send our orders. Infiltrating the village wouldn't be easy. A full detachment of Ottoman soldiers had occupied it. The Ottomans had chosen an isolated location for their desert outpost. It seemed lightly defended. It was also well stocked with arms and equipment. The ancient ruins were all that remained of a civilization now lost to time. The Ottoman Empire brought in the modern world with a host of armored vehicles and field guns. 3 commanders to eliminate, 3 personal message capsules to be stolen, and then sent with our false orders. How Zara tackled this dangerous and audacious mission was up to her.
Hello Warfighters, War is Hell. Welcome to the next episode of Battlefield 1, where we're talking about some of the history within the game and kind of what's going on, so that way you can enjoy this a little bit more. Battlefield 5 is about ready to start. I should get it started either this week or next week, so that way we can kind of continue on this tradition of looking at some of the history that is in some of these games. Now, I didn't know much about the Arab Revolt prior to this video. I mean, I had obviously played through these missions. I had heard about it. I just didn't know that much about what took place during the Arab Revolt during World War I. So hopefully, with the documentaries and some of the articles that I ended up reading, you guys will kind of learn some things too. So the Arab Revolt was started by a man named Hussein bin Ali on June 10th of 1916. That's when it was officially marked as starting with the first battle. The idea behind the revolt, though, was its original aim to create a large Arab state that would exist between Syria and Yemen. British and French officials had promised the Arabs that if this were to go well, that the Arabs would be granted their own independence from the Ottoman Empire to be able to make this one Arab nation that had been sought for some time. We'll kind of get back to that a little bit later on. The revolt, though, is kind of deceptive in its name, though. One of the things that I found is, even though it's called an Arab revolt, most of the Arabs actually remained loyal to the Ottomans. It was really just a small portion of Arabs who ended up fighting for this particular movement. But it was successful despite the relative small numbers, and I'll kind of get more into numbers here in a bit, at really holding off a lot of Ottomans from taking part in some other areas of the First World War that may have been more sensitive. For example, one of the things about the Arab Revolt that's kind of widely recognized is it pinned down enough forces that the Ottomans really weren't able to make a push for the Suez Canal. And they think that if the Arab Revolt hadn't occurred, there might have been the capture of the Suez Canal. And the British were one of the biggest proponents of this Arab Revolt. For that reason, they wanted to make sure the Suez Canal was secure. Looking at the origins of why the Arab Uprising took place, it is very complex. Let's be honest, though, a lot of things pertaining to the Middle East in its origins are very complex, but it is kind of safe to say to talk about some history about how this has impacted some of the relations in the Middle East today and some of the chaos that's going on. But anyway, what is kind of easily known, I had a hard time understanding everything about the origins itself. But one thing that's important to note is Arab nationalism was on the rise right before World War I. In 1913, the first Arab Congress was formed. And the idea behind it was it wanted to seek better autonomy or larger autonomy between the Arab people and the Ottoman Empire. One of the things that they had called for example, is the Arabs that were conscripted into service for the Ottoman Empire would stay close to home unless, of course, war broke out. In fact, a lot of Arabs actually fought for the Ottoman Empire in World War I. And one cool thing that I read was that about 250 Arab POWs who were captured by the British, I believe, were actually sent back to fight for the Arab revolt. So that was kind of interesting. But it really goes to show that, you know, Arabs were on both sides of this. It wasn't just all one side or the other. But despite these efforts that were made to try and get some more autonomy, Turkey was going the other way. They really wanted, or the Ottoman Empire was going the other way. They kind of wanted everything to be centered around Turkey, and so they didn't want to grant this autonomy to the Arab states. They wanted to give more authority to Constantinople. So, Hussein bin Ali saw this as an opportunity, though, to really gain some power. His eventual aim was to rule most of the Middle East, so he was one of the big proponents of this large Arab nation, because if he was the one who was kind of leading this effort, the chances are he would be the one who would be the leader of this new nation. Now, over the course of the Arab Revolt, there's varying numbers about how many people actually ended up joining the Arab Revolt. Like, one place I saw said that Hussein bin Ali was able to muster around 5,000 people to his cause, but I've also seen numbers as high as 50,000 and maybe even higher. One of the things that was very difficult is because of this revolt being so unique, there was a number of fighters who would end up joining and leaving. A lot of this was based off of tribes, location, things like that. For example, if there was fighting near a tribe's home, that tribe may end up joining the fight on the side of the Arab revolt. Then once the battle was decided, they may return to their homes and they're no longer going to stay fighting. It was things like this that kind of happened throughout the entire campaign. So this is why numbers were kind of hard to come by. In addition, those who did end up fighting for the Arab Revolt, a lot of them, I shouldn't say a lot, but a significant number of them, weren't necessarily believers in the cause, but were more mercenaries more than anything else. And so I had seen some numbers. I think it was like 1.25 million French francs were sent during 1916 alone to kind of pay off or pay some of the fighters. And the British were spending about 221,000 pounds per month, which is a staggering amount actually for that time. Anyway, there was a heavy financial investment because, again, these people were fighting, or some of these people were fighting for money and not necessarily for the cause they were fighting for. So as I said, June 10th, 1916 was the first major engagement that took place when everything started. This was the Battle of Mecca. This battle took place for more than a month, and the Turkish troops, or the Ottoman troops, I'm going to use that interchangeably, they were better equipped than the Arab fighters, but they were also heavily outnumbered. Most of what took place most of the fighting that took place in Mecca was in the streets, so a lot of urban fighting took place. On July 9th of 1916, the battle finally ended with an Arab victory. Much of Mecca, though, had been leveled by Ottoman artillery throughout that entire, basically a month. Now while Mecca had been destroyed, one of the advantages of this was that Hussein bin Ali was able to kind of use this to recruit some more people to his cause. Remember, Mecca is the holiest city in all of Islam, so he was able to say that the Ottomans not only destroyed, but they desecrated their most important city. And so those who did believe kind of saw this as a big thing to kind of look at for what it would be like to be underneath the Ottomans and some of the things that they would have to endure. If they were willing to do that to their holiest city, what would they do to their own homes? And the victory in Mecca, though, would not have occurred as easily. I'm not saying that they would have completely lost, but it wouldn't have been as easily won, and I'm doing air quotes right there because a month of urban fighting definitely means it's not an easy battle to win. Without the support, though, of the French and the British. The money, training, small arms, and heavy weapons that were provided throughout the entire revolt were desperately needed by the Arabs. So this direct support continued, as I mentioned, throughout the entire revolt, and really contributed to a lot of the early victories that took place, specifically along the Red Sea. The British Navy even helped support some attacks on some of the ports and other areas along the Red Sea. During the entire revolt, though, the British and French supplied, obviously, guns, armored cars, artillery, when they could. One of the things that's widely known is that there was a general shortage of artillery. You just look at the number of artillery shells that were fired even per hour during World War I. It's a staggering amount. It's no surprise that it was hard for them to kind of keep up and to spare some extra weapons and ammunition for these artillery pieces in the Arab Revolt. The British also sent Egyptian and Indian troops. The Royal Flying Corps, the Imperial Camel Corps were sent in 1918 to kind of help out, and the French sent about 1,100 officers to assist. So there was a lot of support for the Arabs in this. It is kind of important to note this wasn't just all of them, but it was a cooperative effort by them and allies. 1917 rolls around, and one of the major focuses of the Arab Revolt is cutting off Ottoman supplies to the area and also be able to capture some supplies as well. There were a lot of attacks that took place on the Hijaz Railroad, which I actually wouldn't be surprised if this is the inspiration for these 3 missions that we're seeing in Battlefield 1. Because like in March 1917, Lawrence of Arabia, who we talked about in the previous video, led his first assault on these railroads. This became a major battleground that year. Ottoman forces kind of knew that it was pivotal that they held and maintained this railroad, and so they looked to clear out the area. They even recruited some of the the Arabs who were loyal to them to kind of help them fight, and so there was a lot of success by the Ottomans in trying to clear out the area of those who were part of the Arab Uprising. Now you gotta remember the Arabs were irregulars, and they didn't do as well in head-on attacks. I mean, even in 1918, there's a couple instances where they're attacking a railroad station and they suffer heavy casualties. A lot of these guys were tribesmen who were just picking up, joining the fight, didn't have that great in training. A lot of the types of combat that you would see them take part in were some raids. For example, one that T.E. Lawrence took part in September 1917 that was kind of set out as an example of the kind of fighting that he wanted to take part in, even though Hussein bin Ali wanted more direct engagements. But in September 1917, T.E. Lawrence ended up blowing up a bridge as a rail convoy was going across it, and then he waited there even after he destroyed the bridge for the repair crew to kind of come along, and he attacked them too. So that's kind of more along the lines of the types of engagements that you would normally see the Arabs taking part in. Remember, these guys are guerrillas, essentially, I guess is the best way to put it. Asymmetric warfare was the name of the game for them. 1918 comes, and there are more supplies and support that are starting to pour in. We talked about some of these things a little bit ago. And the Arabs were able to take on larger forces with mixed success. There was a pretty big effort to secure some of the largest targets in 1918, especially with what was kind of going on in Europe. They started to see that the Ottoman Empire was struggling as well, not being able to get the kind of support from Germany and Austria that they had gotten in the past. So they wanted to take advantage of that and hit as many important targets as they could. The last port was captured in 1917 at the Battle of Aqaba, I think is how you pronounce it. And so with that secured, the railroad in 1918 once again becomes a major target. In the spring, for example, there was an operation that was set in motion against the same railroad. We were talking about 1917, and again, what is probably featured here in these videos. It was called Operation Hedgehog. It was pretty grand in its design, but it was successful in taking about 25 bridges along the railroad, as well as some other important checkpoints as well. When you take out 25 bridges, you're going to have a lot of gaps in the railroad, and it's going to be very difficult to be able to move supplies. So this, of course, went out helping the Arab Revolt a little bit more. A number of other victories took place all across the Middle East in 1918 that really started to wear down the Ottoman troops in the area, both as far as supplies, men, and most importantly, morale. In some cases, the Ottoman troops were surrendering en masse whenever they ended up seeing a British force or any of these Arabs even too. One of the biggest factors that contributed to the decline in morale of the Ottoman forces was the Tafas massacre. So at the Tafas massacre, there's actually 2 massacres that take place in the town of Tafas. So the one we're going to be talking about here was actually done by the Arab forces under T. Lawrence. What happened was there was a retreating force of Ottoman, German, and Austrian forces who had basically pillaged the town of Tafas. And once they were outside of that, Lawrence caught up with them and he gave this order of no prisoners. So about an entire brigade's worth of German, Austrian, and Ottoman forces were just outright killed. This no surrender policy was verified by a letter that Lawrence ended up writing to his brother. One of the reasons that he said that he gave this order of no prisoners was because of the Ottoman massacre in the same city of Tafas, which took place earlier as they were kind of retreating. There's some pretty gruesome accounts of what the Arabs ended up doing, and the Ottomans ended up doing as well, so it was pretty bad all around. But this retaliation, though, ended up being pretty effective as word kind of got around, and as opposed to it stirring the Ottomans to anger, it really did kind of put a lot of fear into them, and was what motivated them to surrender, knowing full well that if they were to be captured after a battle, they may not end with a good fate, I guess is the best way to put it. But 1918, Aleppo, Damascus, Jerusalem, Lebanon, a large part of the Arabian Peninsula ends up being captured. The last Ottoman stronghold ends up falling in January 1919 after the war had ended. But remember, one of the biggest factors of this was a promise that was made to the Arabs that their efforts were going to be rewarded with independence. Obviously, that didn't happen if you take a look at the map now. This was due to the Sykes-Picot Agreement, which we're going to talk about in the next episode and kind of go over what that did and what that meant for the world today. Basically, Arabs felt betrayed, and understandably so. So hopefully that will get you a little bit excited for the next episode that's going to be coming later this week. But anyway, thanks for watching. I appreciate it. Subscribe and hit the notification bell so that way you can be informed when the next one comes out. Like the video if you enjoyed what you saw. If you can support me on Patreon, please do. Also, if you join our Discord, a lot of great conversations there. Thanks for watching. War is hell. I've got your 6.
You see, the message had already been sent, my dear. No, not the message you would have wanted. Lawrence was such a good host. It almost seemed rude to escape. I made sure to note the location of Lawrence's camp, of course. Which means the train knows too. Twice, you told that train everything was clear. But I told it exactly where to attack. The beast has your scent, my dear. And it's coming to slaughter you and your little band of rebels. First, the firestorm from the cannon. Then, up close with the troops to slaughter any survivors. The legend of Lawrence of Arabia dies tonight.